The night shift at St. Augustine Trauma Center always felt longer after midnight. Riley Ward pushed a med cart down the main hallway, the wheels squeaking every few steps. The overhead fluorescents hummed softly above her, washing everything in a tired, pale light. The city outside pressed in through the narrow windows, a smear of red taillights and marine layer fog drifting off the Pacific. Somewhere a television murmured about a game that had already ended hours ago. A janitor's mop slapped rhythmically against the tile. The vending machine near the waiting room coughed out a soda for the third time in an hour. It was the kind of quiet that made people think nothing bad could happen this late. Riley knew better than that. She stopped at room 12, scanned the barcode on the door, and slipped inside. An elderly man lay half-propped on the bed, oxygen cannula pinching his nose, remote clenched in his hand like it might run away if he let go. "Hey, Mr. Caldwell," she said, voice low. "How's the movie this time?" He squinted at the screen. The volume was up too loud. A black-and-white war film flickered there, smoke and mud and boys too young and carrying rifles. "Same one they keep showing," he muttered. "Nobody ever ducks when they should. That's how you know it's fake." Riley smiled, adjusting his blanket with one hand and lowering the volume a notch with the other. His eyes dropped to her forearm as she tugged the sleeve of her scrub top up. Pale scar tissue, ropey and twisted, peeked from beneath the cuff before she yanked it back down. "Where'd you get that?" he asked. "Kitchen accident," she lied easily. "Never fight a deep fryer, Mr. Caldwell. They always win." He snorted a laugh and finally loosened his hold on the remote. Riley checked his vitals, tapped them into the tablet, and made sure his IV line was clear. Her hands moved quickly, precisely. She never wasted a motion, never needed to think about where to put her fingers. She finished charting, then stepped back toward the door. "You got that look," Caldwell said suddenly. Riley paused, hand on the handle. "What look?" "Sand and mortars," he grumbled, turning his eyes back to the screen. "I seen it before." The hum of the lights grew louder for a second. Riley's throat went dry. "Get some rest," she said. "Call if you need anything." She slipped out before he could say anything else. In the hallway, the air smelled like disinfectant coffee and something faintly metallic that never quite left. She pushed the cart again, the small squeak now louder in her ears. At the nurses' station, 2 older nurses were chatting around a computer, half paying attention to the monitors. "Ward, you done with your med passes?" one of them asked without looking up. Almost Riley answered, "Just the post-op in 16. "Good," the other nurse said. "Keep to the easy cases tonight, all right? Big stuff is for the trauma team." She nodded, swallowing whatever answer tried to climb up her throat. She had learned early not to argue. Not with people who thought they knew exactly what she was and exactly what she was not. Her badge read, Riley Ward, RN, nothing more, no rank, no indication of the years that had come before, that sand caked in her boots, and rotors pounding the air overhead. No one here knew the taste of that dust. She had made sure of it. The overhead speaker popped and crackled, then cleared his throat like an old radio. "Unit 2 inbound to St. Augustine, Level 1, Trauma. GSWs to the chest. ETA 3 minutes. Voices at the station stopped mid-sentence. The room sharpened. Someone grabbed a clipboard, another reached for gloves. The charge nurse spun toward the intercom. "What did they say?" one of the residents asked. "Gunshot wounds," the charge nurse replied. "Multiple, Level 1, move." And just like that, the quiet died. Riley parked the med cart against the wall, locked the wheels, and drifted instinctively toward the ER doors. Staff bodies slid into a familiar choreography. Trauma bay lights flickered to full brightness. A crash cart was wheeled into place. Someone called for extra units of O-negative. The hum of the hospital shifted from sleepy to electric. Rain clattered harder against the glass entrance. In the parking lot, emergency lights pulsed across wet pavement. The doors at the ambulance bay swung open. Wind and water swept in, first chilly and damp. Then came the stretcher, pushed fast enough to rattle the frame. 2 paramedics flanked it, faces tight. Blood spattered the white sheet in bursts of dark red. It dripped off the edges, streaking the floor where the gurney passed. A pair of dog tags bounced against the patient's chest, clinking together in a frantic metallic rhythm. Riley felt her stomach tighten even before she saw his face. "Male," the first paramedic shouted over the noise. "Approximately 50 GSWs to the chest and abdomen, coded twice. This is Rear Admiral Cole Mercer. Repeat, Rear Admiral Cole Mercer, Navy." The words rolled through the hallway like a shockwave. Every head turned. The trauma team surged forward. Riley froze for half a second at the edge of the chaos. The name hit her like a physical blow. Rear Admiral Cole Mercer. His face was paler than she remembered. Eyes closed, lashes dark against skin gone almost gray. His uniform shirt had been cut open on the ambulance ride, fabric stained torn. Bullet holes gleamed wet in the fluorescent lights, ringed with angry bruised flesh. Blood pooled under his back on the stretcher, seeping into the mattress. For a moment, another image fought to cover this one. Smoke and fire. Sand turned black. A heavy arm around her shoulders dragging her through rubble. A voice in her ear, rough but steady. "Breathe, Ward. Stay with me. You got work to do." The stretcher slammed through the ER doors into Trauma Bay 2. The dog tags clattered louder, their sound somehow more frantic than the flat voice of the paramedic calling out blood pressure numbers. BP 70/30, heart rate unstable, he's on 2 units already. "Move, move, move," a surgeon barked. "On my count, 1, 2, 3. They lifted Mercer from the ambulance stretcher to the hospital bed. He looked smaller on the wide table swallowed by bright light from the ceiling lamp. Multiple hands were on him at once, cutting away the rest of the uniform, slapping EKG leads onto his chest, pressing gauze into wounds that refused to stop bleeding. Riley hovered near the doorway, pressed almost flat against the wall as more staff squeezed around the bed. The room smelled like copper and antiseptic and sweat. Plastic packaging crackled as someone tore open more syringes. "Airway looks compromised," one doctor said. "Where is anesthesia?" On their way, another snapped. "Hang another unit. Clamp that bleed." The monitor above Mercer's head spit out numbers in jittery green lines. His heartbeat stuttered across the screen in erratic bursts, then elongated into a dangerous plateau. Riley's pulse synced with it, unwilling then misaligned. "Ward, what are you doing in here?" a senior nurse snapped, catching sight of her. "This is not your case. Go finish your passes." Riley's feet did not move. Her hands were cold. She clenched one around the edge of her badge until the plastic dug into her palm. The air in the trauma bay seemed to shrink. Voices overlapped fast and sharp. Someone knocked a tray and instruments clinked, sliding dangerously close to the floor. Dr. Adrian Cade strode in gloves, already on mask hanging at his neck. His white coat was immaculate, as if nothing in the world could stain it. "What do we have?" he asked briskly. "Multiple GSWs to the chest," the resident answered. "Admiral Cole Mercer." He coded twice on the way in. "We stabilized for now, but he is tanking." Cade's eyes flicked to the monitor, then to the wounds, then briefly, very briefly, to Riley. There was something unreadable there, something that passed so quickly she could not hold on to it. "All right," he said. "This is not the night we lose a 3-star. Get her out of here. I need room to move." A hand closed around Riley's elbow, steering her backward. She jerked away on instinct, the touch too close, too much like another set of hands years ago, hauling her away from another dying man. Her heel bumped the wall. She steadied herself, breathing through the sudden rush of the memory. Ward, the senior nurse, warned softer now. "Go." She nodded throat tight and stepped a few feet further back, but she did not leave the doorway entirely. Her eyes stayed locked on Mercer. On the way, his chest rose in shallow, ragged pulls. On the way, the blood pooled in strange, slow patterns around the gauze. On the way, the monitor lines seemed to hesitate, thinking before diving again. "Pressure is dropping," someone called. "I am losing his pulse." The room was a blur of moving bodies. Monitors beeped in shrill protest. The red numbers on the screen fell. A metallic taste flooded Riley's mouth, uninvited and familiar. Her hand crept up almost on its own, pressing against the old scar hidden beneath her sleeve, as if the skin there could remind her where she was. San Diego, not Kunar. St. Augustine Trauma Center, not Outpost Raven. She told herself that, once, twice. Inside the trauma bay, they wheeled another cart closer. A tray of intubation tools gleamed under the light. Voices sharpened as the numbers on the monitor slid lower towards something no one wanted to say out loud yet. Riley stood just outside the line where the bright light ended and the dim hallway began, watching as if a pane of glass separated her from the scene. Her badge weighed heavy on her chest. Rear Admiral Cole Mercer lay on his back, blood soaking the sheets underneath him, dog tags. Still clacking weakly as if refusing to lie still. The night shift had finally woken up. For a moment, it felt like the whole room leaned over Admiral Mercer and forgot the rest of the world existed. Someone shouted for more suction. Another reached across the table for gauze and knocked a stack of blue towels to the floor. A young resident fumbled with a clamp hand slick. "Pressure is 60 over nothing," a nurse called out, watching the monitor. "He is crashing. I am losing it." The green line on the screen jittered, broke, flattened, then twitched again. The beep turned shrill, a sound Riley had heard in other rooms and other nights in other countries. Her vision narrowed. The white walls blurred. The only thing that stayed sharp was Mercer's throat, the slight tremor in the tendons as his body fought for air. Noise thickened in her ears. Commands blurred together. She could still make out a few words. "Get respiratory. Start compressions. Where is anesthesia?" Her own heart thudded hard in her chest once, twice, then settled into a deliberate, unnatural calm. The air in the trauma bay changed. It smelled less like hospital and more like dust and burned metal. She was not in San Diego. She was on a cot, in a canvas tent lit by a bare bulb, bodies lined up on the floor, the roar of helicopters outside. The same panic, the same sharp smell of blood and antiseptic. The same feeling of time sliding off a cliff. Doc Ward, a voice had yelled in that other life. You are the only one who knows this. Move. Hands had shoved her toward a man on a stretcher, his chest rising in weak, shallow jerks, his airway compromised by the angle of his neck. She had seen the pattern of his wounds, the way his lungs labored, the tiny pauses in his pulse. There had been no time to argue, no time to ask permission. Now in St. Augustine, the patterns matched. Mercer's chest rose, then stuck, then fell unevenly. Blood pooled around the chest tube in a way that did not fit what they were treating. The tilt of his head was wrong for his injuries. The oxygen mask did not sit quite right on his face. The room around him spun. Riley stepped forward. Ward, the senior nurse, snapped again. You are out of position. She did not answer. Her shoes squeaked once on the wet floor as she crossed that invisible line between hallway and trauma bay. She slipped past a resident who was reaching for another syringe and came to stand beside Mercer's head. Get her back, someone barked. Riley ignored them. Her fingers moved before she could talk herself out of it. 2 fingertips to the side of Mercer's neck, not where they were checking his pulse, but a hair higher, at a point only she seemed to see. The warmth of his skin hit her damp and fragile. She felt the flutter there, weak and irregular, not gone, not yet. Her other hand slid beneath his shoulders just enough to adjust the angle where his spine met the mattress. She tilted his chin a few degrees, lifting his airway without the standard maneuver they drilled in nursing school. Her thumb pressed under the jaw in a pattern she had learned under canvas and smoke where textbooks did not reach. Ward stopped, the senior nurse hissed, reaching for her wrist. Do not touch her, Riley said, steady but quiet. It surprised even her. The nurse hesitated, and Cade glanced up, irritation flashing across his features. What is she doing? The resident muttered. Riley did not look at them. She watched Mercer's face, the way his eyelids trembled, the way the veins at his temples stood out. Come on, she whispered, not sure if she was talking to him or herself. You have done worse than this. She shifted the oxygen mask slightly, sealing it more firmly over his mouth and nose. Adjusted the flow. Altered the angle a fraction more. Her fingers at his neck kept the subtle pressure, a strange combination of blocking and supporting the artery, so that what blood he still had pushed where it needed to go instead of collapsing into the chaos of his wounds. The room held its breath. The monitor screamed one more high unbroken note. Then it stuttered. Then it broke into beeps again, spaced shallow, but there. Heart rate coming back up, someone said, disbelief bending the words. BP is climbing. 80/40, 90. What is happening? The green line smoothed into an unstable but recognizable rhythm. The red numbers crawled upward. The alarm shifted from panic to warning. Cade's head snapped toward the screen, then back to Riley. Hold that position, he ordered before he could stop himself. She did fingers steady despite the tremor that wanted to start in her hand. She felt Mercer's pulse change under her touch, growing stronger, more regular. He was still pale lips tinged blue, but there was a difference now. A thread of life pulled taut instead of fraying. The room moved again. All right, Cade said, voice tightening back into control. We have something to work with. Get me another unit. Prep for the OR. We are not losing him now. The staff jumped back into motion, their movements a little sharper, a little faster, charged by the sudden reversal. The tension in the air shifted from hopeless to barely hopeful. Riley stepped back slowly, easing her fingers away from Mercer's neck as another nurse took over at the head of the bed. Her hands felt oddly numb. She flexed them once, twice, as if trying to remind them they belonged to her. The senior nurse stared at her. What did you just do? She asked. Riley swallowed. Her tongue felt thick in her mouth. I adjusted his airway, she said. The blood was pooling wrong. His carotid needed support for a second so the flow could stabilize. That is not a hospital protocol, the nurse said. It worked, the resident muttered under his breath. Cade was still watching Riley. Something sharp moved behind his eyes, something beyond irritation. Calculation, maybe. Recognition. Who taught you that maneuver? He asked. Riley opened her mouth. For a split second, she was back in that tent at Outpost Raven Hands, deep in another man's chest, shouting for more pressure as mortar blasts shook the ground. A voice over her shoulder had told her to try it. A voice that did not belong to any professor she had ever had. She could not answer honestly, not here, not yet. I have seen it used, she said, keeping her gaze on Mercer, in a field setting. Field, Cade repeated quietly. The word hung there heavy. At the edge of the trauma bay, the door slapped open. Director Linda Parks stood there, hair pulled back in a tight twist blazer thrown on over what might have been gym clothes. Her eyes were sharp and fully awake. I got called out of bed for a code on a federal admiral, she said. Someone tell me why his vitals are improving instead of flatlining. Her gaze swept the room. It landed on the monitor, then on Mercer, then on the smear of blood on Riley's sleeve. Parks' lips thinned. Who touched him without clearance, she asked. Silence rolled through the bay. For a second, no one moved. Finally, the senior nurse spoke. She did, she said, nodding toward Riley. Riley Ward. She was not assigned to this case. She entered the bay without authorization and interfered with trauma care. Park's eyes shifted to Riley, slow and disbelieving. Is that true? She asked. Riley straightened a little. It put her directly under the harsh light. The dog tags on Mercer's chest glinted in the corner of her vision, flashing with each slight movement of his breathing. He was dying, Riley said. I saw a pattern in his vitals that matched something I had seen before. I corrected his airway and supported his carotid. His pressure responded. That is not the question I asked, Park replied. Did you enter this bay and touch a federal VIP without being part of the assigned team? The words federal VIP stuck in the air. Yes, Riley said. A muscle worked in Park's jaw. She looked at Cade. Doctor, did you authorize her intervention? She asked. Cade hesitated. The room heard it. No, he said at last. She acted on her own. He did not add that he had told her to hold the position when the monitor changed. He did not say that his eyes had widened the moment Mercer's vitals climbed. Park's gaze hardened. To everyone in this room, she said, raising her voice so it carried, Rear Admiral Mercer is not just another patient. He is a federal asset. Our contracts, our funding, our standing with the Department of Defense all depend on how we handle this. There are protocols for a reason. She stepped closer to Riley, heels silent on the bloody floor. You do not improvise on a man like that, because you feel like it, she said. You do not touch him without orders. Do you understand what kind of liability you just created for this hospital? Riley looked past her to the monitor. The numbers were steadier now. Mercer's chest rose and fell under the oxygen mask. The dog tags moved quietly. I understand he is alive, Riley said softly. For a second, something flickered across Park's face. Not quite doubt, not quite respect. It vanished quickly. This is not a debate, Park said. You will step out of this room immediately. You will remove yourself from any contact with Rear Admiral Mercer. Then you will report to my office as soon as he is transferred upstairs. The senior nurse moved to take Riley's arm again, gentler this time. Come on, she murmured. You heard her. Riley let herself be guided backward. The bright circle of light over the trauma bay receded as she crossed back into the dimmer hallway. The sounds inside grew softer, muffled by the closing doors. The beep of the monitor reached her one last time, a faint, stubborn heartbeat pushing through glass and metal. Outside the bay, the corridor felt almost empty. An orderly leaned against a cart further down, pretending not to watch. A fluorescent bulb near the exit flickered, painting the white walls in quick flashes of red and white from the emergency sign overhead. Riley looked down at her hands. Mercer's blood stained her palms and the cuffs of her sleeves, drying in uneven streaks. Her fingers curled, then straightened as if they could still feel the weight of his pulse. Ms. Ward, a voice called behind her. She turned. Director Park stood framed in the doorway of the trauma bay, the bright light spilling around her shoulders. For a moment, it made her look taller, almost like a shadow cut out of the glare. Do not disappear, Park said. We are going to have a very serious conversation about what you did. The door swung shut again, sealing the Admiral in the chaos inside. The echo of the latch clicked through Riley's chest. She stood alone in the hall under the red glow of the exit sign, her hands still marked by the man she had just pulled back from the edge. The elevator ride to the administrative floor felt longer than it should have. Riley stood alone, watching the numbers blink upward. Her scrub top was stiff where Mercer's blood had dried. The air in the elevator smelled faintly of detergent and whatever cheap perfume the day shift favored. Far below, she imagined the trauma bay, still humming lights, bright voices tight. Up here, everything was quiet or insulated, as if the hospital did not want to admit that anything messy ever happened on this level. The doors opened with a soft chime. The carpet in the executive hallway muffled her footsteps. Framed awards lined the walls, all clean glass and bronze plaques. There were no crash carts here, no plastic bins of gloves, no Sharps containers taped to the walls. Just framed photos of smiling administrators at ribbon cuttings and charity galas. Director Park's office door stood half open at the end of the corridor. Light spilled out across the carpet in a pale rectangle. Riley stopped just outside, took one small breath, then knocked on the frame with her knuckles. Come in, Park called. The office was large, with a view of the city through a wall of glass. Downtown lights glittered in the distance. The harbor was a smear of darkness between them. A sleek desk dominated the room, neat stacks of paper aligned at precise angles. A small digital clock glowed on one corner, its red numbers cutting through the soft lamplight. Park sat behind the desk blazer, buttoned now, hair pulled even tighter. A tablet lay in front of her screen, dark. Beside it sat a pen engraved with the logo of a defense contractor Riley had seen on supply crates in another life. Sit, Park said, gesturing to the chair across from her. Riley sat. The leather creaked softly under her weight. She folded her hands in her lap to hide the faint tremor in them and to keep the dried blood from touching the armrests. For a moment, Park just looked at her. Not at her badge, not at her chart, but at her face. Riley met her eyes and held them. Her heartbeat thudded in her ears, slow and too loud. "Your file says you have been here 7 months," Park said finally. "Graduated from a state nursing program. Strong clinicals, good references, minimal incident reports." Riley did not answer. She did not trust her voice yet. "It does not say you are a risk-taker," Park continued. "It does not say you are a cowboy. It does not say you improvise on high-value patients." Riley's jaw tightened at the word cowboy. "I am not a cowboy," she said. "You walked into a trauma bay where you were not assigned," Park replied. "You put your hands on a federal admiral without being asked. That is not standard nursing practice." "He was dying," Riley said. "There is a difference between courage and liability," Park said. "Do you understand that?" Riley stared at the edge of the desk. The wood was smooth, dark polished within an inch of its life. Her own reflection hovered in it, blurred by the shine. "Do you remember the training you received when you were hired?" Park asked. "The special section on federal patients. VIP protocols. Chain of command." "Yes," Riley said. "Tell me what it said," Park pressed. "That all orders regarding federal patients go through the attending physician," Riley recited slowly. "That deviations from prescribed care must be approved. That unauthorized contact is grounds for immediate discipline." "Good," Park said. "You remember." She picked up the engraved pen and turned it between her fingers, the metal glinting in the lamplight. "So you knowingly violated that protocol," she said. "You knew the rules and chose to break them." Riley thought of the monitor flatlining of Mercer's chest, stuttering of the way his pulse had felt under her fingers. The smell of dust and flames that had seemed to seep through the walls. The voice in her head that had not been hers telling her to move. "Yes," she said quietly, "I did." "And why?" Park asked. Riley looked up. "Because I knew how to fix it," she said. "The assigned team did not," Park replied. "At least not in that moment. They still had the legal authority. You did not." Her tone stayed calm. It was almost more unsettling than shouting would have been. "You are not hearing me," Park continued. "This is not just about you and a patient. This hospital holds multiple contracts with the Department of Defense. Tonight, the man on that table was not just bleeding. He was a symbol of all of that. Every move we make around him will be scrutinized by people who have never set foot in a trauma bay. They will look for any reason to question our competence, or to cut funding." She set the pen down very gently. "You gave them a reason," she said. Riley swallowed. Her throat felt raw. "Would you rather he died?" she asked. Park's eyes flashed. "Do not put those words in my mouth," she said. "We are not talking about my feelings. We are talking about liability, optics, paper trails. When Washington calls and they will ask who touched him. They will ask who made decisions. They will ask whether we can be trusted with the next one they send." She exhaled once through her nose as if releasing a small fraction of tension. "You know what protects this hospital?" she asked. "Clear lines, clear blame. We can show them the protocols. We can show them the chain. What we cannot show them is a rogue nurse stepping in because she knows better." The word rogue pressed against Riley's chest like a thumb. Park opened a folder on the desk. Riley caught a glimpse of her own name on a printed form. "Effective immediately," Park said, "your employment at St. Augustine Trauma Center is terminated." The words landed with a dull weight. Riley stared at the page. The letters blurred for a second, then sharpened again. Termination. Cause. Violation of protocol. Failure to comply with direct instructions. Park slid the folder and a pen across the desk. "You need to sign these," she said. "There is a section acknowledging that you understand the reason for dismissal. There is also a clause regarding confidentiality. You will not discuss tonight's events with the press or on social media." Riley let out a small breath that was almost a laugh, except it held no humor. "I do not have social media," she said. "Good," Park replied. "Then that clause should be easy." Riley picked up the pen. Her fingers smudged a faint streak of dried blood on its shiny surface. She scanned the top of the page. She did not read every line. She knew how this looked on paper, defiant, reckless, a neat explanation for any questions that might come later. She signed where Park pointed. Once, twice, initials in the small boxes. "Leave your badge on the desk," Park said. "Security will escort you out. You will not return to patient care areas." Riley unclipped the badge from her scrub top. The plastic rectangle felt heavier than it had in months. She set it down next to the folder. Her photo on it stared up at her, grainy and flat. "Is that it?" she asked. "For you," Park said. "Yes." Riley stood. Her legs felt steady, even if everything else inside her did not. She turned toward the door. Her fingertips brushed the edge of the chair as she passed a light touch that grounded her for half a heartbeat. "Ms. Ward," Park said quietly behind her. Riley paused, looking back over her shoulder. "If I were in an ER as a patient," Park said, "I might be glad to see you walk in. But I am not a patient tonight. I am a director. Try to understand the difference. Riley held her gaze for a long moment. I do, she said, more than you think. She stepped out into the hallway. The carpet swallowed the sound of the door clicking shut behind her. The elevator ride down was silent again. No music, no other passengers. Just the faint mechanical whine and the red numbers counting back to the ground floor. On the main level, security was waiting. A guard Riley recognized from night shifts approached her hands, resting near his belt, not quite touching the radio there. Ms. Ward, he said, I was asked to walk you out. His voice was neutral, almost apologetic. Sure, Riley answered. They crossed the lobby together. The waiting room held only a couple of people now slumped in plastic chairs, eyes on their phones or on the television in the corner. A news anchor talked about overseas deployments, a map flaring red in several distant places. The automatic doors sighed open as they stepped outside. Night air rushed in cooler than inside, carrying the smell of wet asphalt and the tang of the ocean. The rain had slowed to a fine mist that beaded on Riley's hair and eyelashes. Do you need a ride? The guard asked, once they reached the edge of the covered entry. No, she said, I have my car. He nodded, hesitated, as if he wanted to say something else, then thought better of it. Good night, then, he said. Good night, she replied. He turned back toward the building. Riley stood for a second under the awning watching him go. The red glow from the emergency sign above the entrance painted the wet pavement in front of her in thin streaks. In the distance, sirens wailed somewhere along the highway. Her car waited at the far end of the parking lot, a faded silver Civic under a flickering street lamp. She started toward it, hands shoved into her pockets against the damp. Each breath came out pale in the cool air. The hospital stood behind her, all glass and light, a bright ship in a dark lot. Somewhere inside, Admiral Mercer lay between this world and whatever waited on the other side. She had touched that line twice tonight. Once in the past, once in the present. It felt like both were still clinging to her hands. The ground beneath her shoes vibrated slightly. She frowned and slowed, thinking it was her imagination. Then she felt it again. A low, muted rumble that rose up through the soles of her shoes into her legs. Headlights swung into the driveway, bright white cutting through the mist. One vehicle, then another, then more. Black SUVs rolled into the hospital lot in formation, turning with practiced precision. 8 of them, maybe more, all the same. Make same tinted windows, same heavy bodies that seemed too calm for their own speed. They pulled to a stop in a line near the entrance. Engines idled low and steady. Brake lights glowed red, bathing the front of the building in a wash of color that made it look for a moment like something was on fire behind the glass. Riley stopped walking. The first SUV's doors opened almost in unison. Men and women stepped out, all in dark suits, some with coats, some without. No one raised their voices. No one hurried yet. Their movements were quick, controlled. This was not hospital security. This was something different. 2 nurses smoking under a smaller awning near the corner of the building froze cigarettes halfway to their mouths. One of them muttered something under her breath. The other just stared. Riley stayed where she was, halfway between the entrance and her car. One of the suited figures broke from the cluster and walked toward her. He was tall, lean hair, cropped short, jaw set in a way that suggested he had spent years clenching it through worse nights than this. His coat moved around his legs in the damp wind. Riley Ward, he called. His voice was calm, carrying easily across the space between them. Every muscle in her body went tight. Her first instinctive thought was that Director Park had called someone, that this was about paperwork, disciplinary action beyond termination. I already turned in my badge, she said, lifting her hands slightly to show they were empty. He kept walking until he was a few feet away. Up close, she could see the lines at the corners of his eyes and the small crease between his brows that did not go away when his face relaxed. This is not about your badge, he said. He reached into his coat. Riley almost flinched, then stilled when she saw what he pulled out. A slim tablet, black at screen already glowing. He tapped once, then turned it so she could see. A photo filled most of the display. A younger version of her stared back. Same eyes, same jaw, but the hair was shoved under a helmet. Night vision goggles rested on top of it. She wore a different kind of uniform, dark and heavy body armor strapped across her chest. A patch on her shoulder was blurred by motion, but she did not need it to read the memory. She could see the edge of a helicopter ramp behind her. Dust rose around her boots. The name at the bottom of the image read HM2 Riley Ward Navy Hospital Corpsman, status KIA, Outpost Raven Kunar Province. The initials hit her like a punch. Killed in action. She tried to swallow. Her mouth was dry. You have the wrong person, she said, but there was no strength in it. The man held her gaze. My name is Marcus Hale, he said. I work with a unit that watches people like him. He nodded toward the hospital behind her where Mercer lay unseen. And people like you, he added. She looked back at the photo. at the younger woman who smiled faintly at whoever had taken it, unaware of what was coming. Riley's hands were no longer trembling. They felt very still. "What do you want?" she asked. Hale turned the tablet back toward himself, tapped twice, then met her eyes again. "To talk," he said. "Somewhere that is not a parking lot." Riley looked past Marcus Hale to the row of SUVs. Engines idled in a low, patient growl. Exhaust curled in faint white threads under the red brake lights. One of the nurses by the side entrance whispered, "Is that Secret Service?" The other shook her head without taking her eyes off the scene. Hale followed Riley's glance, then turned back to her. "You are not under arrest," he said, "if that is what you are wondering." "That was the second thing I was wondering," she replied. His mouth twitched almost a smile. "The first," he asked. "How you got that photo," she said. Hale studied her face as if weighing something. "It came from a classified report that has not been updated in years," he said. "Which is why I'm standing here. We had you listed as dead in Kunar. Then you walked into an ER in San Diego and performed a field technique that is not in any civilian training manual. On a 3-star Admiral you were not supposed to touch." He let that sit for a moment. "We pay attention to things like that," he added. Rain beaded on the shoulders of his coat. Riley could feel it gathering on her own eyelashes, cold and light. "And if I say no," she asked, "if I get in my car and drive away?" Hale glanced back toward the hospital for a brief second. The glow from the emergency sign painted one side of his face red. "Then we will have to knock on your door later," he said. "Possibly with more people and more questions. I do not recommend that version." Riley looked at the photo on the tablet again, at the helmet, the goggles, the blurred patch. At her own expression caught somewhere between exhaustion and a kind of stubborn focus. She drew a slow breath. "Fine," she said. "I will hear you out." Hale nodded once as if he had expected that answer all along. He slid the tablet back into his coat. Then he turned and walked with her toward the nearest SUV. The other suits watched them approach, some with open curiosity, some with professional blankness. Hale opened the rear door and stepped aside. "After you," he said. For a second, the dark interior looked like the mouth of something that could swallow her whole. Thick leather seats, tinted window shadows. Riley bent her head and climbed in. The inside smelled like leather and faint coffee. The door shut with a heavy muffled sound cutting out the patter of rain and the distant sirens. The world narrowed to the soft glow of instrument panels and the low murmur of radios. Another agent slid into the seat beside her. Hale took the seat across facing them. The driver up front spoke softly into a mic clipped to his collar, then put the vehicle into gear. The convoy pulled away from the curb in near perfect unison. City lights slid by outside the tinted glass, blurred streaks of yellow and red on wet asphalt. Riley could see her own reflection faintly in the window overlaying the passing streets. Her scrub top was still stained. Her hair was damp, stuck to her neck. She pressed her palms together in her lap, fingers interlaced, as if she were trying to keep them from acting on their own again. "No cuffs," she said finally. "That is a good sign, at least." "We are not here to punish you for saving a life," Hale said. "We are here because of what that life is connected to, and because of you." "That sounds comforting," she said. "It is not meant to be comforting," he replied. "It is meant to be clear." He tapped the back of the front seat, and the driver adjusted something on the dash. A screen between the two front seats flickered to life, showing data she could not read from this angle. "Where are we going?" Riley asked. Hale did not look away from her. "Orion Facility," he said. "It is a temporary command site we set up near the harbor." "Orion," she repeated. "A name," he said. "You can call it whatever you want. It is a room with screens and people who do not sleep much." The SUV took an exit ramp. The hum of the highway changed to the rougher rhythm of surface streets. Neon signs flashed by, half-closed diners, empty parking lots, the occasional figure standing under a street lamp, hunched against the damp. Riley watched the blur of the city and tried to ignore the way her chest felt too tight. "When did the report say I died?" she asked. Hale leaned back in his seat. "Outpost Raven," he said. 6 years ago. Mortar attack on a forward operating base. One confirmed survivor evacuated on a medevac flight. Status unclear. Subsequent notes classify that survivor as KIA. Paperwork afterwards is a mess. Your name is on 3 different lists with 3 different endings. And you picked the one that suited you, she said. "No," he said. "We picked the one that fit what we knew at the time. Then you did something tonight that did not fit." He watched her for a moment. "I have a question for you too," he said. "Why St. Augustine? Why San Diego? You could have disappeared anywhere." Riley looked away from him back to the window. The reflection of her hands in her lap was still there. "San Diego has water," she said. "St. Augustine had an opening on nights. No one asked many questions. It was not the full answer. It was the piece she was willing to hand over." The convoy turned into a part of the city where the buildings grew lower and more industrial. Warehouses lined the street, their facades blank except for the occasional faded logo. The air changed, carrying the smell of salt oil and rust. The SUV slowed, then turned through a wide gate that slid open at their approach. Inside, the lot was lit by tall poles that cast harsh white circles on cracked asphalt. One large warehouse dominated the space, its windows dark. As the vehicles rolled closer, a side door on the warehouse opened. A sliver of warm light spilled out. Figures moved inside. They pulled to a stop beside the building. The engines cut one by one. For a moment, the silence felt thick. The agent beside Riley opened the door. "Careful on the step," he said. She climbed out. The night air hit her again, colder here than at the hospital. The smell of the harbor was stronger, mixed with the metallic scent of old machinery. Hale joined her and led the way toward the warehouse door. The ground underfoot was gritty. Her shoes left damp prints behind her. Inside, the building looked nothing like its shell promised. The wide open space had been divided by rows of tables and provisional walls made from metal frames and fabric. Screens covered almost every vertical surface. Some showed maps, some scrolled with lines of code. Others flickered with camera feeds, including several angles of St. Augustine Trauma Center. Riley saw the entrance, the lobby, a shot that looked like it was from the parking lot where she had just stood. Red and blue dots glowed on a blueprint of the hospital, moving slowly through halls. People in plain clothes sat at stations, headsets on fingers flying over keyboards. Conversations overlapped, quiet but constant. The air hummed with electronics and focus. No one here looked surprised to see her. Some of them straightened slightly. One or two gave her a quick nod, nothing more. It felt like walking into a different kind of operating room. Hale guided her toward a central table covered in documents, photos, and a large digital map built into the surface. He pulled out a chair. "Sit," he said again. This time there was less command in it and more simple practicality. Riley sat. The chair was metal cool through the thin fabric of her scrubs. In front of her, someone had laid out a file. A single photo sat at the top of the stack. It showed a group of men in uniforms more informal than dress blues, some in t-shirts, some in tactical gear. They stood in front of a line of armored vehicles, weapons slung across their chests, dust hanging in the air around them. The sky behind them was a hard, cloudless blue. In the middle, slightly off to one side, there she was again. Younger, thinner, eyes a little too serious for the half-smile on her face. Helmet under one arm this time, the same blurred patch on her shoulder. Above the photo, printed in small black letters, Outpost Raven Cunard Province. Riley's fingertips hovered over the image without quite touching it. She could hear the rotors in her head, feel the grit in her teeth. "Where did you get that?" she asked. "From the same place we got the other one," Hale said. He had moved to the other side of the table. "You recognize everyone in that picture?" She let her eyes move across the faces. There was Reyes gritting two wide teeth bright against tan skin. Miller, arms crossed, rolling his eyes at something off camera. Singh adjusting his radio even as the shutter clicked. Jax, the point man, chin up, gaze steady. Her throat tightened. "Yes," she said. Hale tapped a tablet to one side. The image on the table screen shifted. The photo shrank and a list of names appeared beside it. Red lines crossed through most of them. "Raven took a hit that does not make sense on paper," he said. "Wrong timing, wrong angle, wrong combination of mortar and small arms. According to the official story, the Taliban got lucky. According to our intercepts, luck had nothing to do with it." He looked up at her. "You were there when it went sideways," he said. "You survived long enough to get on that bird. Then your trail goes dark. That might have been the end of it. But Admiral Mercer did not die tonight. You pulled him back with a maneuver you should not know. And the doctor who was supposed to be responsible for him has a record that intersects with Raven at all the wrong points." Riley blinked once. "Dr. Cade," she said. Hale nodded. "Adrian Cade," he confirmed. "Civilian trauma surgeon. Consultant on battlefield triage. He was embedded at Raven 2 days before the ambush. He flew out 12 hours before the first shell hit. Tonight he signed the order to remove you from Mercer's bedside. While you were holding his life in your hands," Riley's own hands had gone cold again. She placed them flat on the table to keep from curling them into fists. "He told us he wanted to study how medics work under fire," she said slowly. "He watched everything. He asked questions that felt wrong. The night before it happened, he sat in the tent and went over our evacuation routes like they were case studies." Her voice trailed off. Hale waited. "When I woke up in Germany, Riley said 2 analysts outside my curtain were arguing. One said it was bad luck. The other said no one walks artillery in that precise without help. He said someone sold us out." Hey. She looked at the picture again, at the red lines through names that had once answered when she called. "I heard them say the words high level," she continued. "That it would never go on record. That anyone left alive would be a liability. So I pulled out my IV, signed a form I did not read, and got on the first transport heading away. I changed my name. I picked up the pieces that were left and built something new. Hale's face did not change, but his posture shifted a fraction closer. You did not tell anyone what you heard, he said. Who was I supposed to tell, she asked. The same system that wrote me off as dead. The lights reflected off the surface of the table map, casting faint red and green patches on their hands. Hale glanced at a monitor where Mercer's vitals were displayed as numbers and lines. They were steadier now, but marked by cautionary colors. Admiral Mercer commanded the task force that pulled your team into Raven, he said. He has been asking uncomfortable questions for years. Funding trails, contracts, consulting agreements, everything that touches Cade. Tonight someone put 5 bullets in him to shut him up. He let the implication sit. You pulled him back, Hale said. That means you pulled the thread too, whether you wanted to or not. Riley stared at the photo of Raven, at the woman in the middle who had not yet learned what was waiting a day later. Her hands stayed on the table, flat and open. For a while the only sound Riley heard was the hum of the servers and the soft murmur of voices around them. The warehouse felt both too big and too small, like the walls were a long way off, but the air itself was closing in. Hale tapped the table. The image on the surface shifted again. This time it was not a dusty base in Cunard. It was a still frame from inside St. Augustine. The angle was from high in a corner of the ceiling, a security camera view of a medication prep room. Stainless steel counters, stacks of labeled bins, a cart parked against one wall. The fluorescent light cast a sickly tint over everything. A figure in scrubs stood at the counter back to the camera, cap on, mask up, shoulders slightly hunched. In the corner of the image, a timestamp glowed white. It matched the hour Riley had been doing med passes upstairs. Pharmacy camera, 2300 hours, Hale said quietly. That is just before Admiral Mercer arrived. He tapped again. The image advanced in short bursts. The person at the counter opened a locked cabinet. Their movements were neat, efficient. They pulled out one bag from the shelf, checked the label, then set it aside and reached in again. This time, the bag they chose looked slightly different. Less familiar even through the grainy footage. They hung it on an IV pole, adjusted the clamp, scanned something with a handheld device, then wheeled the pole out of frame. Pause, Hale said. The screen froze with the figure half turned. Their face was still mostly hidden by the mask and cap, but the camera had caught enough. The line of the jaw, the set of the eyes, the slight hook in the nose, and Riley's breath caught. Zoom, Hale ordered. The image tightened. Pixels grew coarser, but the features came into focus just enough. Riley's skin prickled. That is Cade, she said. Her voice came out flatter than she expected, as if the words had been pushed uphill. Yes, Hale said. We ran it through our own recognition software, 98.7 match. Riley stared at the image. At the tilt of his head, the familiar line of his shoulders. She remembered him leaning like that against a table at Raven, watching her pack a wound on Miller's leg, asking about how long it took to stabilize someone in the field if evacuation was delayed. His tone had been curious, neutral, clinical. At the time, she had tried to be flattered, a civilian surgeon interested in their work, validation in a place that offered little of it. Now her stomach rolled. Play it again, she said. Hale obliged. The short sequence looped. Cabinet, bag, swap, pole, exit. He bypassed 2 nurses to do this, Hale said. Told one of them he was helping the pharmacy staff catch up. Told the other he was dropping off a stat order for a patient in the ICU. Riley forced herself to look at the bag he chose. The shape of it, the way it hung, the faint tint in the fluid. That is not from our standard suppliers, she said. We do not stock that brand. We know, Hale said. We pulled it. Lab is working on it now. She did not need a lab to tell her what it was. Her nose almost remembered the smell of it, sharp and chemical, layered over the burned sand and diesel fumes at Raven. It shuts down the autonomic response, she said slowly. Makes it look like the body is giving up on its own. If you slow drip it, it reads like natural failure of an already stressed system. Hale watched her closely. Where did you see that used? He asked. In a tent, she said. On my squad. Someone slipped it into their fluids. At first we thought it was sepsis. It did not act like sepsis. Their bodies were just stopping piece by piece. The mortar came after. Another image flickered across the table. This time it was a shot from an overhead drone, a grainy view of Raven from above. Tiny figures scrambled between buildings. Smoke unfurled from one side of the frame. The toxin gives them less time to fight back before the shells hit? Hale said. Less time to mount a coordinated defense, less chance of anyone staying alert enough to see where the fire is really coming from. He tapped a key on his tablet. On another screen, lines of text scrolled, punctuated by clusters of numbers. These are encrypted communications we intercepted tonight, he said. originating from inside St. Augustine's network, routed through 3 hops, but we can still see the initial node. The timing lines up with Mercer's arrival. Riley squinted at the symbols. They meant nothing to her in that form, but the way the analyst at the next station leaned forward told her they meant everything. Translations, she asked. Hale slid a printed sheet toward her. Short phrases stripped of context marched down the page. Package inbound. Confirm status of asset. Dose when alone. Remove interference. No survivor. Riley's finger stopped on the 4th line. Remove interference, she said. Yes, Hale replied. She thought of Cade in the trauma bay mask, hanging loose, eyes cold. The way he had ordered her out. The way he had answered Park. No authorization, he had said. Not a normal physician's outrage, something sharper. Riley's chest tightened again. He did not fire me because of protocol, she said. He did it because I got in the way. Hale did not nod. He did not need to. You have to understand, he said instead. From his perspective, you should not exist. You were a ghost on a misfiled after-action report. Then a ghost walks into his ER and recognizes a pattern he has only used in one other place. That is a loose thread. Loose threads are dangerous. Riley looked back at the Raven photo, at the faces she knew crossed out with red. She had spent years convincing herself that what happened there was a combination of chaos and bad luck, that if she had checked a line sooner, if she had insisted on a different route that night, something might have shifted. It was easier to blame herself than to imagine someone they trusted had marked them for death. Now that old belief cracked. He was one of us, she said quieter now. Not by uniform, but by proximity. He sat at our table. He listened to our stories. He joked about food. He was in our pictures. Hale tapped the Raven photo again. At the very edge, half turned away from the camera, barely visible, a figure in non-standard clothes stood near the vehicles, head down, clipboard in hand. They zoomed in. The face blurred, then cleared just enough. Adrian Cade, younger, fewer lines, but the same eyes. He put himself in the corner of the frame, Hale said. Close enough to gather intel, far enough to stay out of the official record. Riley's mouth tasted like metal again. Why Mercer, she asked. Why now? Hale looked at another screen. It showed scanned documents with blocks of text, blacked out signatures at the bottom. Because Mercer has been following a trail that leads back to Cade's consulting fees, he said, and to a set of shell companies that launder money from certain contracts. Raven was one of the first. Others followed. Each time Cade was nearby, each time casualties were higher than projections. Each time his bank accounts got fatter. So he sells out the unit, Riley said, gets paid, leaves the mess behind. And anyone who can draw a line between the money and the bodies needs to go away. Hale finished. The warehouse felt colder. Riley rubbed her thumb along the edge of the table, grounding herself in the slight roughness there. Does Mercer know it is him, she asked. We think he does, Hale said. He has been digging into Cade specifically for the last 6 months. Connections to private military contractors, logistics transfers that make no sense. Cade is careful, but Mercer is stubborn. Riley glanced at the monitor that tracked Mercer's vital signs. The line of his heart rate pulsed across the screen, steady for now. He was at Raven when they pulled me out, she said. Mercer, he could have stayed back. He did not. He came into the fire. Hale nodded. We read that in the report, he said. What there was of it. She swallowed. So now Cade is here, she said. In my hospital, standing over the same man, trying to finish what he started on a different continent. Her voice did not rise. If anything, it dropped as if the weight of the idea pushed it lower. Hale watched her closely. This is where I stop giving you files and start asking for something, he said. She looked at him. We need you to walk us through Raven, he said. Everything you remember. Not just the big pieces. The small things, too. Who talked to whom? Who left early? Who asked strange questions? Sometimes memory holds onto details the record does not. Riley stared at the photograph of her unit again. For a moment, the room around her faded. She could hear Reyes laughing about something that was not funny now. She could smell the soup they had complained about and still eaten. She could feel the shifting weight of her aid bag on her shoulder. Her hand moved on its own fingers, finally touching the edge of the photo. The paper was cool and smooth. They died thinking it was bad luck, she said. Hale did not respond. Riley exhaled slowly. Fine, she said. You want Raven, you get Raven. Her eyes lifted to his. But if we do this, she added, we do not leave him out of it. She tapped the frozen face of Adrian Cade on the screen. He sits in every part of this story. They worked their way through Raven in pieces. At first, the memories came out of Riley in short, clipped phrases. Times, call signs, the sequence of mortar bursts. Then, as she followed the line of the map on the table with her finger details she thought she had lost began to surface. The way the air had smelled that night, hot metal and old sweat. The position of the generator behind the med tent. the exact way Cade had leaned in the doorway of the aid station, arms folded when the first shells hit. Hale listened without interrupting except to clarify a distance here, an angle there. An analyst occasionally stepped closer to adjust something on the digital map, dropping a marker where Riley pointed. "This is where Jax went down," she said, tapping one corner of the base layout. "He was still conscious when I got there. He could not feel his legs, but he was making jokes. He said if we got him on the bird, he would buy the whole team around." Her jaw clenched. The scene hung in front of her for a heartbeat, then faded. And this, she said, moving her finger, is where Cade appeared. Right after the second volley, no one saw him during the first. Hale looked at the dot she indicated. "What did he do?" he asked. "Nothing," she said. That was the problem. He stood there, clipboard in his hand. He watched us triage like we were a live fire exercise. Then someone yelled that he needed to get in the bunker, and he finally moved. Hale nodded and made a note on his tablet. "You are sure about the timing," he said. "Yes," Riley replied. "We were taught to track time in our heads. On the field, seconds matter. I can still hear the gaps between those mortars." She closed her eyes for a second, listening. The warehouse dropped away. The distant hum of servers became the imagined thump of explosions. When she opened them again, the room was back. Screens, people, the faint smell of coffee and ozone. The overhead speakers crackled. Command a voice called from one of the stations, "You need to see this." Haley looked up. The analyst at a console to their right had taken off his headset and was half turned toward them, a crease between his brows. "What is it?" Hale asked. "Feed from St. Augustine," the analyst said. "Admiral Mercer's vitals just took a dive." Riley's head snapped to the monitor above the analyst's station. The lines that had been steady, if fragile, now dipped and spiked in a frantic rhythm. A large red warning icon blinked at the edge of the screen. "He was stable 15 minutes ago," Hale said. "Not anymore," the analyst replied. His fingers flew over the keyboard. "They just called a code in his room." Riley's chair scraped back. "Let me see the feed from his floor," she said. The analyst switched views. The screen split into 4 panels. One showed the hallway outside Mercer's room, nurses darting past. Another showed the nurses' station phones ringing, staff grabbing charts and equipment. The third showed a view inside the ICU room itself, partially obscured by a privacy curtain, but clear enough to see a cluster of bodies around the bed. The fourth panel was black static. "What is that?" Riley asked, pointing. "Security cam in the east stairwell," the analyst said. "It cut out 2 minutes ago." "Show me the log," Hale said. A window popped up, timestamps scrolled past. "Camera went offline at 23:21, the analyst said. "Came back for 5 seconds, then offline again. Could be a glitch." "Or someone pulled it," Riley said. Her pulse was starting to race in a way that had nothing to do with old memories. "Where is Cade?" she asked. Hale looked at another screen, this one showing a list of staff IDs and their last recorded badge swipes. "Last ping from his badge was at 2300 hours in the ICU," Hale said. "No exit swipe, no transfer to another unit." "So he is in the building," Riley said. "Or someone wants it to look like he is not," Hale replied. The monitor showing Mercer's vitals screamed again. The heart rate line stuttered. The blood pressure numbers dropped. Riley's throat burned. "He is being dosed again," she said. "Or whatever Cade started is peaking. They will not know what to look for. They will treat the wrong thing." Hale studied her face. "You heard the director," he said. "You are terminated from St. Augustine. You step back in there, you are walking into a political mess I cannot shield you from." "Then do not shield me from it," she shot back. "You brought me here because I am the only one in this city who has seen that toxin work in real time. You want Mercer alive and talking, you need me in that room." The lights from the monitors cast a pale halo on her skin. Her eyes were bright not with fear, but with something harder. "Besides," she said lower, "now Cade knows I am the one who recognized his pattern. I am already on his list. You said it yourself. Loose thread." The warehouse felt very quiet for a moment. Hale's jaw shifted. He looked from Riley to the screen where nurses in the ICU jostled around Mercer's bed, then to the map of the hospital on the table. On the blueprint, a small red dot, representing Mercer's room, blinked in warning. "Gear up," Hale said at last, raising his voice just enough for the nearest agents to hear. "We are going back in. Ward is with us." An agent at a nearby rack tossed him a tactical vest. Hale shrugged into it as he walked. Someone else handed Riley a dark jacket to cover the worst of the blood on her scrubs. She slipped it on. The fabric was heavier than what she was used to, but familiar in its own way. It hugged her shoulders, grounded her. Hale paused at the door, one hand on the handle. "Understand something," he said to Riley. "Inside that hospital, we are guests. We do not have full jurisdiction. We cannot flash badges and make the building disappear. We will need to move fast and smart. You talk only when you have to. You touch only what you must. You stay behind me if things turn loud." Riley nodded. I know how to move in someone else's house, she said, and I know how to stay low when the shooting starts. He held her gaze another second as if judging whether to argue, then pushed the door open. Outside, the night had not changed much. The mist was still falling, the harbor still smelled of salt and fuel. The SUVs lined up like patient animals' engines already turning over as if they had been expecting this. They climbed in. The convoy pulled out of the lot and slid back into the city streets, this time faster, more focused. Riley sat in the same seat, but everything felt tighter. Her hands rested on her knees, not clenched, ready. Streetlights whipped past in steady rhythm. Somewhere in the distance, a ship's horn sounded, once low and mournful. How long to St. Augustine, Riley asked. 8 minutes if the lights cooperate, the driver said. They will cooperate, Hale replied. He spoke into his radio. A moment later, sirens wailed ahead. Police units that had been idling on nearby streets moved into position, clearing a path. Traffic lights seemed to shift in their favor more often than not. The hospital rose into view, a familiar silhouette against the low clouds. Its windows glowed, but the scene outside was different now. A few more patrol cars. A small knot of people near the entrance, some in scrubs, some in street clothes, all craning to see what was happening. The convoy pulled up to the emergency entrance. Doors popped open. Agents fanned out, a few heading straight for the main doors, others peeling off to secure the perimeter with the local police. Riley stepped out into the wash of fluorescent light. The air here felt charged like the moment before thunder. Nurses clustered just outside the sliding doors, faces tense. One of them, the same who had complained about big stuff being for the trauma team, stared when she saw Riley. I thought you were fired, the nurse blurted. She is with us, Hale said. He flashed a badge that did not belong to any hospital department. The security guard from earlier, the one who had walked Riley out, stood near the entrance. His eyes widened when he saw her, then flicked to Hale, then to the line of black vehicles. Is the Admiral dying? Someone asked. Riley felt the question like a hand on her spine. He will be if we stand here talking, she said. Hale placed a hand on the door sensor. The glass parted, releasing another wave of hospital air, cooler than outside, carrying the sense of antiseptic and fear. They stepped inside. The lobby was busier now. A few people stood near the information desk, voices raised. A security officer tried to calm them. Overhead, an announcement called for a rapid response team to the ICU. Riley followed Hale toward the bank of elevators at the back. An agent already held one open thumb, pressing the button for the ICU floor. As the door slid shut, Riley caught a glimpse of her reflection again, this time with Hale and 2 agents behind her. For a second, it looked like a team. Not the one from Raven, not the one she had lost, but a formation of sorts. The elevator started to rise. The soft mechanical hum filled the small space. Riley could almost feel the building around them, the weight of floors and people and air. She thought of Mercer on the bed of tubes and wires and the wrong bag of fluid. She thought of Cade somewhere in these walls, moving through staff corridors he knew better than they did. Her fingers flexed once at her sides. Whatever waited when the doors opened this time, she was not standing in the hallway watching from the threshold. The elevator doors slid open onto noise. The ICU was usually a hushed place. Tonight it sounded like the heart of the hospital had started to panic. Alarms chimed from several rooms at once. Voices overlapped in urgent clipped phrases. The sharp scent of alcohol swabs and fresh plastic ried above the usual disinfectant. At the far end of the hallway, a cluster of staff packed around one room. A red code light above the door flashed in steady pulses. Room 514, Admiral Mercer. Riley was moving before the doors had fully opened. Her shoes hit the polished floor in quick, controlled steps. Hale and the agents fell in behind her, forming a loose wedge that cut through the chaos. A nurse at the station spotted them. You cannot be up here, she started, then saw Hale's badge and the set of his face. What is going on? Later, Hale said, right now we are going in there. He nodded toward 5. The nurse hesitated, then stepped aside. She looked at Riley for half a second, recognition and confusion mixing in her eyes. I heard you were fired, she said under her breath. Rumors travel fast, Riley replied. Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. The doorway to 514 was crowded. A respiratory therapist tried to squeeze around a resident with a bag of fluids. Another nurse pressed herself flat against the wall to make space. Riley pushed through soft at first, then with more insistence when no one wanted to give ground. Move, she said. Let me see him. There was something in her tone that made people shift without arguing. She found a gap and stepped into it. Admiral Mercer lay where she remembered, but the scene around him had changed. His skin looked waxier, the gray tinge deeper. Sweat clung to his hairline. His chest rose and fell in shallow, rapid pulls under the tangle of tubes. The monitor above his head painted the air with harsh green and red. His heart rate jerked across the screen in uneven spikes. The blood pressure numbers dipped low, crawled a little, then fell again. His pressure tanked 10 minutes ago, a doctor said, not taking his eyes off the monitor. We adjusted sedation, increased ventilation, started a pressor. Nothing is sticking, a nurse added fingers tapping at the pump controls. Every time we bring him up, he crashes again. Riley did not answer. She let their words wash past her. Her focus narrowed. Lines and tubes ran from the Admiral's arms and chest to the equipment around him. An arterial line, 2 venous lines, central access. The ventilator tubing. The pressor drips. The sedation pump. And hanging above it all on an IV pole, a single bag of clear fluid that did not look like the others. Different label, different shade of plastic, different clamp. Her eyes locked on it. "Where did that bag come from?" she asked. No one answered, at least not directly. The nurse at the pump glanced up for a fraction of a second, then back down. Dr. Cade adjusted his fluids before he went on break, she said. He said pharmacy had sent up a special formulation. There was a rush sticker on the chart. Riley moved toward the pole. "Do not touch that," the doctor snapped. "Ward, you are out of line again." She ignored him. The closer she got, the more wrong the bag felt. The label claimed it was a standard electrolyte solution. The brand, though, was one she had never seen in this hospital. The fluid seemed just a shade too viscous. She leaned in and took a breath near the injection port. A faint, bitter chemical scent hit the back of her throat. Not strong, nothing a casual observer would notice, but to her it was immediate and sickeningly familiar. The tent? The cots? Reyes looking at her in confusion as his hands went numb. Riley's stomach clenched. "Get that off him," she said. The doctor spun toward her. "Absolutely not," he said. "You do not get to bark orders in here. You are not on this case." Hale stepped past the curtain with 2 agents behind him. Their presence filled the doorway without any raised voices. "She is on it now," Hale said. "Follow her lead." The doctor opened his mouth, looked at the badges, and thought better of whatever he had been about to say. Riley reached up, closed the roller clamp on the line, and disconnected the tubing from the port on Mercer's central line. The monitor screamed in protest as the sudden change in flow triggered an alarm. A nurse gasped. "You cannot stop his fluids," she said. "I'm stopping the poison," Riley replied. She threw the line onto a clean towel on the counter, careful not to touch the open end. Her movements were quick but controlled, nothing wasted. "Someone grab me a fresh bag of normal saline from the stock," she said. "Hospital brand only. No special labels. Check the barcode twice." No one moved. Hale's voice cut in low but firm. "You heard her," he said. That snapped them out of it. The nurse nearest the supply cabinet bolted across the room, flung the cabinet open, grabbed a bag, then grabbed a second one just in case. She scanned them both at the pump to verify they matched the hospital inventory, then handed one to Riley with trembling fingers. Riley spiked the new bag, purged the air from the line, connected it to a different port on the central line, and opened the clamp. The monitor did not calm down immediately. Numbers still dipped and stuttered. For a few seconds it looked worse. "Come on," she whispered. She raised Mercer's head slightly, adjusted the position of his body against the mattress. Her fingers found the same point at his neck as before, gave it a briefly measured pressure, then eased back. Pressure, flow, angle. She could almost see the toxin redistributed, diluted, giving his system a chance to push it out instead of drowning in it. The heart rate spikes shortened. The troughs between them narrowed. The blood pressure numbers paused in their fall, hovered low but level. "His map is climbing," the nurse at the pump said, disbelief in her voice. "Not much, but look. 65, 70, 72. The red warning icon on the monitor flashed less urgently, then shifted to yellow. The respiratory therapist adjusted the ventilator settings to match the new numbers. A nurse wiped sweat from Mercer's brow. Riley stepped back a fraction, lungs finally taking a full breath. "It was in the fluid," Hale said quietly behind her. "Yes," she answered. "Same pattern as Raven. The drip makes it look like his own body is quitting." She pointed at the bag she had taken down. "Do not throw that away," she said. "Seal it, double bag, label it. That is evidence now." Hale signaled to one of the agents. He pulled on a pair of gloves from a dispenser, lifted the offending bag carefully by the plastic hook, and slid it into a clear biohazard pouch, then another over that. The doctor who had snapped at her stood back from the bed. He looked rattled more from having been wrong than from anything else. "What did you smell?" he asked. "Toxic compound," Riley said. "We saw it used overseas. It is subtle. Unless you know to look for it, it reads like organ failure." She did not add that whoever used it liked that fact very much. Hale checked the hall through a gap in the curtain. The ICU seemed to have settled a notch. Staff moved with purpose instead of panic now that the blaring alarm had softened. "Where is Cade?" Riley asked. The question had been ticking at the back of her mind since she saw the bag. A nurse near the door looked up, startled. "He was here about 20 minutes ago," she said. "Said he was checking on the Admiral personally. We have not seen him since." "Did he say where he was going?" Hale asked. "No," she said. "He just walked out. He did not sign out on the board." Riley moved toward the doorway, drawn by something she could not quite name. Instinct, maybe. Or just the memory of his eyes through the mask in the trauma bay. She stopped at the threshold and scanned the hallway. ICU rooms lined both sides, glass doors and curtains offering slices of other lives. Monitors glowed softly beside each bed. A few families sat hunched in chairs near the walls, faces pale, eyes tired. At the far end of the corridor, just beyond the pooling light from the nurse's station, a figure stood half hidden at the turn, where the main hall met a staff-only passage. Scrubs, cap, mask, hands at his sides. He did not move, he did not fidget, he just watched. Riley's skin tightened. Even at this distance, she knew the way that frame held itself. Weight balanced evenly on both feet. Shoulders relaxed. Head tilted a fraction as if studying a specimen. Dr. Adrian Cade. Her breath left her in a slow, controlled stream. "He is here," she said softly. Hale came up beside her, following her gaze. "Which one?" he asked. "The one who is too still," she answered. As if he sensed the attention, Cade shifted. His eyes, the only part of his face not covered, met Riley's across the length of the ICU. For a second, everything else around them blurred. He inclined his head just a little, not in greeting, more like acknowledgement, a small mocking tip. Then he turned and slipped around the corner into the staff passage, movements unhurried. He did not look back. Riley's muscles coiled. "He is not running," she said. "He is inviting us." Hale looked at the agents behind them. "Lock down this floor," he said. "No one in or out of the staff corridors without my say. Ward, you are with me. The rest of you cover the ICU. Do not let anyone near this room who is not on that board." Riley glanced once more at Mercer. His vitals were still fragile, but they had cleared the most immediate brink. The line of his heart rate pulsed with a stubborn, uneven determination. She tightened the jacket around her shoulders and stepped into the hallway. The light seemed harsher now. The red glow from the code light above 514 had faded, but other small signals blinked in amber and green along the ceiling, marking doors and exits and alarms. At the end of the corridor, the staff passage waited, its door propped open by a laundry cart. Beyond it, the lights dimmed, the hum of the main ICU dropped away. Riley headed toward it, Hale at her shoulder, agents falling in behind the world, narrowing again to a single path and the man who had chosen it. The staff passage felt like a different hospital. The polished floors of the ICU gave way to duller tiles scuffed by years of carts and shoes. The lights were spaced farther apart, leaving pockets of shadow between each fixture. The hum here was lower, almost a drone, the sound of vents and hidden machinery instead of monitors and voices. The laundry cart propping the door open smelled faintly of bleach and damp cotton. Riley stepped around it, senses stretching. She had walked plenty of back halls in hospitals, supply closets, service corridors, shortcuts the public never saw. This felt different, narrower, closer, like the building was holding its breath. Hale kept pace beside her. An agent followed a few steps back, radio in hand. Another stayed at the entrance, coordinating with the uniforms near the ICU. "Security is sealing off the elevators at this end," the agent behind them murmured into his mic. "Stairwells are being checked." "Do not box him in too tight," Riley said, eyes scanning the dim hall. "Cornered people do stupid things. He is already halfway there." Her voice echoed faintly off the walls. An equipment cart lay on its side a few yards ahead, wheels still slowly turning. Packs of gauze and tubing littered the floor around it. A small plastic basin rolled in a lazy circle until it bumped the wall. Riley's muscles tensed. "He wants us to know we are following him," she said. Hale glanced at the mess, then at her. "You sure?" he asked. "He is too controlled to leave this by accident," she said. "He wants us keyed up." They stepped around the cart. The air changed again, cooler here, tinged with something sweeter. The distant hum of a refrigeration unit sounded from behind a closed door marked med storage. Further down the hallway took a slight bend. Beyond it, they could see the flicker of a light struggling to stay on. Then Riley saw the shoe. A white sneaker, just visible at the edge of the bend heel, pressed against the baseboard. Attached to a leg, attached to a body. She closed the distance in 3 quick steps. A nurse lay half on her side, half on her back. Uniform, wrinkled dark hair spilling from a loose ponytail. Her name badge hung sideways from its clip. Ortiz Leah RN. There was a small puncture mark on the side of her neck. The skin around it was already turning an ugly, dusky color. Her eyelids fluttered weakly, lashes trembling. Riley dropped to her knees. "Leah," she said, keeping her voice low and steady. "Can you hear me?" Leah's eyes cracked open a sliver. Confusion swam there, mixed with fear. "Felt dizzy," she whispered, voice barely audible. "He said there was a spill in the med room. Asked me to help. I do not." Her gaze unfocused. Her chest rose in shallow, uneven breaths. Riley pressed 2 fingers to the side of Leah's neck, just below the puncture. The pulse there was fast and thready, like a trapped bird battering itself against a cage. She is still with us, Riley said. Toxin low dose, enough to drop her, not enough to finish it. Hale knelt on Leah's other side. His hand hovered near her shoulder, not quite touching. Can she be moved, he asked. She needs support, not a marathon, Riley said. Get a stretcher in here. Tell whoever takes her to watch her blood pressure. Fluids close monitoring, no sedatives unless absolutely necessary. An agent relayed the instructions into his radio. Footsteps thudded faintly somewhere behind them as a team scrambled to respond. Leah's hand twitched near Riley's knee. Riley caught it, gave it a light squeeze. You are all right, Riley said. Stay awake if you can. Focus on my voice. Leah's lips moved, forming a single word. Why, she breathed. Riley had no answer she could give that would make sense lying on a hospital floor in the half-dark. Because he needs you quiet, she said instead, but you are not. Not yet. She squeezed Leah's hand one more time, then gently set it down. Her eyes lifted to the wall. A handprint smeared there and fresh blood fingers dragged downward, as if someone had used the surface to stay upright, then lost the fight. Lined up beside it, written in shaky red letters, was a single word. Run. The letters dripped slowly, each drop leaving a small trail on the tile. Riley stared at it. Her heartbeat thumped in her ears. That is not for us, Hale said. No, Riley agreed. It is for him. What do you mean, the agent behind them asked. He is not warning us to run, Riley said. He is telling me he is moving. He is telling me he is ahead. He thinks this is a game. Her voice cooled as she spoke. At the far end of the hallway beyond the flickering light, something clanged. Metal hitting tile. The sound echoed down the corridor, bouncing off corners impossible to place exactly. Riley rose to her feet, knees leaving a faint pattern on the dust. Stretcher will be here in 60 seconds, the agent said. We can wait, then regroup. Riley shook her head. You wait, she said. I am not giving him more lead. She moved toward the sound, her steps soft and deliberate. Hale signaled to the agent to stay with Leah and then fell in beside Riley. The hallway narrowed further as they advanced. Doors lined one side, marked with small plastic labels. Staff locker. Environmental services. Mechanical. Some stood slightly ajar. Others were shut, their handles cold and still. The flickering light grew closer. One of the ceiling fixtures was half out of its socket wire, hanging at an angle. The bulb blinked in an irregular rhythm, throwing the world into alternating slices of light and shadow. In the next pool of brightness, a rolling cart lay on its side. A metal kidney basin had fallen and rolled until it hit the base of the opposite wall. It lay there on its rim, slowly wobbling itself flat. The last tremor of movement made a small, lonely ring. Behind it, the hallway opened into a wider intersection. One branch led toward the service elevator. The other bent deeper into the building's guts, where the pipes ran thicker and the walls sweated condensation. Riley paused at the intersection, back against the nearest solid surface. She peeked around the corner. At the far end of the right-hand corridor, framed by the dim emergency light above a door, stood a man in scrubs. Adrian Cade. His cap was still on. His mask was up, covering most of his face. Gloves on both hands. In his right hand, he held a syringe, the barrel filled with clear liquid that caught the weak light. He lifted the syringe slightly enough for her to see it clearly, then rested the tip lightly against his own neck just below the jaw. Closer than I expected, he said, voice carrying easily. He spoke to the space between them more than to her, as if the hallway itself was listening. Riley stepped out from her cover just enough so he could see her fully. Hale hovered a fraction behind, keeping himself angled to minimize his profile. Cade, Riley said. Ward, he replied. The way he said her name made it sound like a diagnosis. You should have stayed dead, he added. It would have been neater. Neat was not an option that night, she said. Not for us. He tilted his head, the syringe never leaving his neck. For you, maybe, he said. For me, it was very tidy. One messy base off the board. One obstacle removed. Paperwork filed. Signatures obtained. Payments processed. His eyes were bright in the dim light, almost amused. You sold out a unit that trusted you, Riley said. You watched their medic work so you could time your own damage better. He shrugged as much as he could while keeping the needle steady. I recalibrated outcomes, he said. You know how much money flows through a conflict like that? How many hands take a cut before it reaches the ground? We just redirected the stream to people who appreciated it more. There was no need for your commander to pull on threads that were holding everything together. So you cut the thread, she said. I gave him a chance to step back, Cade replied. He declined. You know how that story goes. His gaze flicked briefly to Hale, then back to Riley, dismissing the agent without words. And you, he said. You were supposed to be a footnote in the casualty report. Lost in the smoke. A number on a list. His eyes traced her, now cataloging. Instead, you walked into my ER, he went on. You put your hands on my patient. You recognized my work. You made yourself very inconvenient. The syringe shifted, the needle glinting. Stay where you are, he said calmly. If any of you take one more step, this goes into the first person I can reach. You, Him, whoever is closest. He glanced at Hale, then back at Riley. You know what this does on a full dose, he said. You have seen it. I am not bluffing. Riley's mouth was dry. Her heart beat hard, but her breathing stayed even. She let herself remember the tent for a moment. The same clear liquid. The same small handgun-sized piece of plastic deciding who lived and who did not. You do not get to walk out of here, she said. Cade smiled behind the mask, his eyes crinkled at the corners. You going to stop me? He asked. Civilian nurse from a community college. You going to tell me you are more than that? The words hit places he could not see, but she did not flinch. In this conversation, she said quietly, I know more than you think. The flickering light overhead chose that moment to stutter. Bright, dark, bright again. Riley took one slow step forward, then another. Stop, Cade warned. I meant what I said. She lifted her hands slightly away from her sides, palms open. You stab yourself, she said. You die in a hallway anyway. You stab one of us. You still do not make it far. You came here because you enjoy control, because you like to watch. Killing yourself would mean you lose your audience. His eyes narrowed. You think you know me, he said. I know your type, she answered. You stand in the corner of the photo so you can see everything without being in the frame. You splice yourself into our work, then slip out before the blast hits. You do not get your own hands dirty unless you can admire the pattern it makes. She took another step. She is right, Hale added, voice low. You had a clear exit 20 minutes ago and you did not take it. You stayed. You knocked Ortiz out instead of putting a bullet in her. You wrote on the wall. He nodded toward the hallway behind them. You like this too much to end it quickly, he said. Cade's jaw flexed. The needle at his neck wobbled just a hair. It was enough. Riley moved. She did not think. Her body fell into an old script. Weight forward on the balls of her feet, left hand up to distract, right hand slicing toward his wrist. The distance between them closed faster than it looked. Cade jerked the syringe away from his neck, trying to turn it toward her. Her hand caught his forearm hard, her thumb digging into the nerve bundle just below his elbow. Pain shocked through his face, his fingers spasming open. The syringe flew from his grip, spinning end over end down the hallway. Hale lunged for Cade's shoulder as Riley stepped in, trying to pin his arm. For a second it worked. They had him between them, his balance broken, his center of gravity tilted. Then Cade twisted years of his own training snapping into place. He drove his shoulder into Riley's chest hard and sudden. The impact knocked the breath out of her. She stumbled back, caught off guard by the force in someone who spent most of his time behind a desk. Hale grabbed for him, fingers catching cloth but not skin. Cade ducked under the grip, spun, and shoved a rolling hamper into Hale's legs. The heavy metal frame crashed into the agent's shins, buying Cade the half-second he needed. By the time Riley pulled air back into her lungs, he was already sprinting down the opposite corridor, shoes slapping the tile. Hale swore under his breath and shoved the hamper aside. Move, he said. Riley was already in motion, the sting in her ribs secondary now. The hallway ahead of them narrowed again. The sound of Cade's footsteps bounced off the walls, drawing them deeper into the maze of the hospital's back corridors. Cade ran like someone who knew every turn. Riley followed the sound of his footsteps more than the sight of his back. The corridor dipped slightly, then veered left toward a service stairwell. An exit sign glowed above the door, red letters bleeding into the dim light. Cade hit the crash bar with his shoulder. The door flew open. The stairwell yawned beyond concrete walls and metal railings dropping in a tight square. The air smelled of dust and old paint. He vanished down the steps. Riley reached the door a heartbeat later. Her palm slapped the bar. The metal was still vibrating. She pushed through and hurtled onto the landing, hand catching the rail to steady her. Below, Cade's shoes clanged against the treads. 1 flight, 2. His shadow slid up and down the walls with each swing of the emergency light. Hale came through behind her boots, sure on the concrete. Careful, he called. Riley had no spare breath to answer. She descended in bursts, one hand on the rail, the other free to catch herself if she slipped. The echo of their pursuit filled the narrow space, a jumble of footfalls and the hollow creak of the stairs. Cade took the turns without slowing much, one hand barely grazing the post at each landing. He did not look up. He did not look back. He just kept moving. They dropped past the labeled floors. Pediatrics, surgery, ground. Now the signs read basement, mechanical, service. At the bottom, Cade slammed through another door. Riley heard the steel strike the stopper and rebound. She hit the landing, lungs burning, and followed. The basement corridor was cooler than upstairs. The ceiling dropped lower. Exposed pipes ran along it, some wrapped in insulation, others bare and sweating. The air had a metallic tang laced with the smell of oil and dust. Somewhere nearby, a generator hummed a steady mechanical heartbeat. Cade darted past a row of stacked crates, then cut through a gap into a wide-open space. Riley recognized the layout from the fire map she had seen posted near the stairs. The boiler room sat at the far end of the basement. Heavy machinery, fewer exits. He was heading that way. She pushed herself a little faster. They burst into the boiler room moments after he did. The space was cavernous compared to the tight corridors. Massive tanks rose from the floor, connected by a tangle of pipes and valves. The floor was painted concrete, stained in places by long, dried spills. The lights here were harsher bare bulbs in wire cages, casting hard shadows. Heat rolled off the machinery in waves. The air felt thicker, heavier. Cade skidded to a stop near one of the tanks. For a second, it looked like he was trapped. Then he reached down and grabbed a length of metal from near a toolbox, some discarded piece of pipe about the length of his arm. He tested its weight in his hand like someone who had done that before. Riley slowed her approach, spreading her feet a little wider. Her ribs ached from where he had driven his shoulder into her. She ignored it. Hale stepped in beside her, gun drawn but angled at the floor, not at Cade. "You are out of room," Hale said. "Drop it." Cade lifted the pipe, resting it across both palms. "You are not going to shoot," he said. "You fire a round in here, hit the wrong valve, and this whole place becomes a steam bath." He gestured lazily with his chin toward the nearest stack of pipes. "And you," he added, eyes sliding back to Riley, "you will not let him try." He was right about that. Riley knew it. Hale knew it too. The angle was wrong, the risk too high. Cade smiled behind his mask, one corner of his eyes crinkling. "We are back where we started," he said. "One medic, one target, no good options." Riley raised her empty hands, palms open to show she was not reaching for anything. "You are wrong about the options," she said. Cade's gaze flicked down to her stance. He saw what she was doing. He adjusted his grip on the pipe, shifting one foot back for balance. "You going to take me down with your nursing skills?" he asked. "Something like that," she said. Heat from the boilers prickled the back of her neck. Sweat slid under her collar. Her pulse thumped in her ear, steady anyway. She moved first, but first this time. She feinted left foot, scuffing loudly on the concrete, enough to make him tilt toward that side. Then she cut right, dropping her weight lower, driving forward at an angle that brought her inside the arc of the pipe just as he swung. Metal whistled past her shoulder. The rush of air carried the faint scent of rust. The end of the pipe hit a pillar with a hollow clang that rang through the room. Riley's shoulder slammed into his chest. Her momentum carried them both sideways. They crashed into a railing, bodies tangling. Cade tried to bring the pipe back around. She jammed her forearm up under his bicep, pinning the limb against the railing. His other hand clawed at her jacket, fingers digging into the fabric. He was stronger than he looked. There was solid muscle under the scrubs, the kind built by someone who did not sit all day. He grunted, pushing back. Riley shifted her weight, sliding her hip between his legs to break his stance. She hooked her ankle behind his and pulled. They went down. The impact knocked the air out of both of them. The world flipped sideways, then steadied. The pipe flew out of Cade's grasp, skittering across the floor in a burst of sparks before settling against a drain. Riley ended up half on top of him, one knee on his arm, the other digging into his ribs. Her forearm pressed across his throat, just above the Adam's apple, pinning his head back against the concrete. His breath rasped loud in her ear. Hale closed the distance in 3 steps, gun still trained low but ready. "Do not move," he said. Cade laughed, the sound strangled under Riley's weight. "You think this changes anything?" he rasped. "You think arresting me fixes what I started." Riley leaned a little harder, enough to cut off a fraction more air without crushing his windpipe. "You do not get to make that speech," she said. His eyes flashed. "You do not have the stomach," he said, voice cracking. "Not for what it would take." He jerked his chin toward the far corner of the room. Riley did not look. She did not have to. She had already seen it when they entered, even if it had not fully registered. The syringe. It lay half under a pipe a few feet from where they struggled, caught in a small puddle of water. The plunger was intact. A tiny bubble floated near the top of the clear liquid. "You know exactly what that is." Cade said, words pushing unevenly past her arm. "You have seen what it does. You could end this right now. 1 stick, a quiet death in a basement, no messy trial, no whispered deals in rooms like this one." His eyes locked onto hers. "You think they will actually let me talk?" he asked. "You think the people who paid me will line up to be exposed? They will move me somewhere you cannot reach, dress it up as security. Then they will clean it up their way. His gaze bored into her. "They will decide what gets remembered and what gets buried," he said. "Unless you decide here." Riley's arm pressed across his throat. Her hand braced on the concrete near his ear. His pulse thudded against her skin, frantic. The boiler room noise dropped away for a moment. The hum of machinery faded, the heat receded. She saw Reyes again, propped on a cot, eyes glassy, asking her if she smelled something strange in his IV line. She saw Jax trying to sit up and failing fingers numb, saying it was probably just shock. She saw Commander Hayes, her CO, frowning at a clipboard in Cade's hands the night before the shells fell. She saw herself younger and thinner hands shaking as she held down a vein, watching the toxin chew through her squad one by one. The syringe in the corner seemed to glow in her peripheral vision. Small, deadly, an answer that would fit in the span of a closed fist. Her grip tightened on Cade's arm. "You want me to be you," she said. He smiled again, lips peeling back from his teeth. "I want you to be honest," he said. "You are not a nurse who happened to know a trick. You are a weapon someone forgot to catalog. Use it." Hale's voice cut in cool and steady. "Riley," he said. She did not look at him. The concrete was rough under her palm. She could feel each grain against her skin anchoring her in the present. She released a breath she did not realize she had been holding. Slowly, she eased the pressure on Cade's throat just enough that he could draw a fuller breath. He sucked air in greedily, mistaking it for victory. Riley shifted her weight, keeping his arm pinned under her knee, then reached toward the syringe. Hale took a small step forward, tension visible in the set of his shoulders. Her fingers closed around the plastic barrel. The liquid inside rolled clear and indifferent. Cade's eyes glittered. "Do it," he whispered. Riley stood up. She moved back out of Cade's reach, then crossed the distance to Hale. She held the syringe out to him, grip firm. "Chain of custody," she said. "You log it, you test it, you keep it somewhere they cannot erase it." For a heartbeat, Hale did not move. Then he holstered his gun and took the syringe, careful not to smudge it. Cade stared up from the floor. "You think that changes the story?" he asked. "I think it writes it down," she said. Hale nodded to the agent who had just burst into the doorway, chest heaving, gun ready. "Get him up," Hale ordered. "Cuff him, hands behind double lock." The agent holstered his weapon, snapped a pair of flex cuffs around Cade's wrists, and hauled him to his feet. Another agent appeared, taking Cade's other arm. Cade winced as his shoulders were forced back, but his chin stayed high. He looked at Riley as they turned him toward the door. "You just handed them your only leverage," he said. "You could have disappeared this problem." "I am done disappearing," she said. Her own voice surprised her. It carried further in the boiler room than she expected, echoing off metal and concrete. The agents marched Cade out. His footsteps dragged a little now, the earlier certainty bled from his stride. The emergency light above the boiler room door caught the edge of his mask as he passed under it, painting it briefly in red. Riley stayed where she was for a moment, watching the doorway empty. The heat from the machinery pressed against her back. Sweat trickled along her spine. Hale examined the syringe in his hand, then slid it carefully into a hard plastic evidence tube an agent held out. He sealed the cap with a sharp click. They both looked at it for a second, at the small cylinder that held so much. Then Hale turned toward Riley. "We have him in cuffs," he said. "That is one problem contained." Riley nodded once. Her chest hurt where Cade had driven into her. Her knees ached from the fall. Her hands were scraped along the knuckles. She flexed her fingers. They still worked. "Mercer," she said. Hale followed her thought. "ICU will have stabilized him for now," he said. "But we should get back upstairs." Riley glanced around the boiler room one more time. The pipes, the tanks, the floor where she had pinned Cade. The corner where the syringe had waited. Then she turned toward the exit. Her footsteps sounded different on the way out, heavier somehow, but still steady. The walk back to the stairs felt longer than the way down. The boiler room heat clung to Riley's skin as she climbed a sticky layer under the cooler air of the stairwell. Her ribs complained with every breath, but her legs kept moving one step at a time, following Hale and the agent ahead. On the second landing, her hand brushed the rail and came away damp with condensation. It grounded her. Metal, cold, and real. They pushed through the door on the ICU floor into a wall of sound. The frantic edge had faded, but the unit was still tense. Nurses moved quickly between rooms, voices, low, eyes sharper than usual. The code light over 514 was no longer flashing red. The steady glow of the room number felt almost unreal. Riley headed straight there. Inside, the air was close and thick with the smells of plastic sweat and the faint sharpness of alcohol. The monitor above Admiral Mercer's bed painted the room in soft green light. The heart rate trace moved in a sawtooth line, regular but slow. The blood pressure number sat in a safer range than before, though still marked with caution. A nurse charted at the side of the bedpan, moving quickly. The respiratory therapist adjusted a setting on the ventilator, then stepped back satisfied for the moment. The doctor who had fought her earlier stood near the foot of the bed. He looked smaller than he had downstairs, his confidence cut down by what he had not seen and what he could not explain. He glanced up as Riley entered. "He is holding," the doctor said. "I do not know how, but he is." Riley's shoulders loosened a fraction. She moved to the bedside. Mercer looked different now that the alarms were quiet. The lines in his face showed more than age. They spoke of too many nights like this in other places for other people. His chest rose and fell in a slow rhythm under the blanket. "His levels," Riley asked, keeping her eyes on him. "Lactic is high but trending down," the nurse replied. "Kidney function is stressed, not failing. We are watching for delayed effects from whatever was in that bag. She nodded toward the sealed pouch sitting on a side table guarded by one of Hale's agents. Labs confirmed it is not anything in our formulary, she said. The pharmacist almost had a stroke when he saw the report. Riley nodded. Keep flushing his system, she said. Careful with the fluid, steady, not too aggressive. His body knows how to fight if we give it room. The nurse nodded, scribbling notes. Hale stood near the door, watching, not interfering. His vest looked out of place in the quiet room, but he wore it like it was another layer of skin. Where is Cade now? Riley asked, without taking her eyes off Mercer. On his way to a federal holding facility, Hale said. He will wake up in a room that does not have windows. Good, she said. The word felt small compared to everything that had led up to it, but it was all she had. She reached for Mercer's hand. It lay on top of the sheet, fingers relaxed, palm facing sideways. She took it gently, wrapping her own fingers around his. His skin was warm now, not that frightening chill. Her thumb moved along the back of his hand in a slow arc. For a moment, she was back at Raven again, his arm around her shoulders, the weight of his body as he dragged her away from the burning vehicle, the way his own breath had hitched as he told her to stay alive. Sir, she said quietly, you are not done. His eyelids fluttered once, then stilled. The heart monitor did not change much. Still slow, still stubborn. She leaned closer. You hauled me out when it would have been easier to let me go, she said. You told me I had work left. You told me to breathe. I listened. Now it is your turn. Her grip tightened a little. I am not the one who gets to call it quits here, she went on. You do, so do not do it yet. The room around her blurred at the edges. The only sharp things were his hand in hers and the green line on the screen. It dipped, rose, dipped again, then slowly the intervals between the peaks shortened. The machine adjusted its tone, shifting to a steadier, less labored beep. The nurse glanced up at the monitor. Heart rate is rising, she murmured. In a good way this time. 90, 95, 100. Mercer's eyelids trembled again stubbornly, as if someone on the inside were pushing against a heavy door. Riley held on. Come on, she whispered. His fingers moved under her palm. A slight twitch, then another. His hand tried to close and could not quite manage it, but the intent was there. The ventilator hissed and sighed, delivering breaths. His chest rose and fell in time with it, but now there was a small, noticeable effort of his own. After a long minute, his eyes opened. They were unfocused at first, pupils slow to react to the light. Then they sharpened inch by inch, pulling the room into view. He scanned the ceiling, the light, the ventilator tubing. Finally, his gaze dropped to the side and found her. Riley. Recognition flared behind his eyes, even through the haze. He tried to speak around the tube and failed, his forehead furrowed with frustration. She squeezed his hand. Do not talk yet, she said. You know better than that. Blink once if you understand me. He blinked, one slow, deliberate movement. Her chest loosened. Hale stepped closer, stopping just shy of the bed. Admiral Mercer, he said, you are in St. Augustine Trauma Center. You took some hits. We neutralized the threat. You are safe for now. Mercer's gaze flicked toward Hale, then back to Riley. He lifted his fingers, muscles protesting, and tapped the back of her hand once, then twice. Her throat burned. You did your job again, she said. You stuck around. His eyes crinkled faintly at the corners. It was not quite a smile, but it was close. The nurse adjusted a drip, then stepped back, giving them space without leaving. Hale nodded toward the door. We will let ICU do its work, he said quietly. There are some things we need to discuss, but they can wait until he is out of immediate danger. Riley did not let go of Mercer's hand. I will be outside if you need me, she said to him. His fingers twitched acknowledgement. She released him gently, letting her fingers slide away. For a second, his hand tried to follow. Then it rested back on the sheet. Outside in the hall, the lights felt too bright. The world seemed louder, as if someone had turned the volume up on everything at once. Hale guided her to a small family consultation room near the nurse's station. It was the kind of neutral space designed for difficult conversations. Neutral art on the walls, a carafe of coffee gone lukewarm on a side table, a box of tissues within reach. She sat. The chair felt both too soft and too hard. Hale remained standing for a moment, then took the chair opposite her. An envelope lay on the table between them, manila thick sealed. Someone had placed it there while they were in the ICU. Riley stared at it. What is that? She asked. Hale rested his hand on it. Your name is not actually on the front, he said, for obvious reasons, but inside it belongs to you. She waited. First, he said, there is a document from the Department of the Navy correcting your status. You are no longer listed as KIA. Your record reflects survival at Raven, unauthorized departure from medical care, and subsequent years off the grid. Her stomach tightened. You make that sound like a polite vacation, she said. The second document, he continued, is from the Department of Justice. It is a formal pardon for any charges that could be associated with your disappearance. Desertion. Failure to report. Things that would only matter to people who wanted you quiet. He tapped the envelope lightly. There is also a recommendation from Admiral Mercer for a citation, he added. Valor under fire both then and now. It will have to be reviewed, but given that he is breathing, I expect they will read it carefully. She stared at the envelope. And the catch, she asked. There is always a catch, he said. In this case, it is simple. We need your statement. Full and on record. Everything you remember about Raven, about Cade, about tonight. The syringe downstairs, the bag upstairs, the conversation in that hallway. We put it all together, and we make it very hard for anyone to pretend this is a misunderstanding. He paused. There is also a payout, he said. Retroactive benefits for someone who was supposed to be buried under a piece of paper. Combat pay, injury compensation, hazard allowances, it adds up. It will not fix anything that matters, but it will give you options. Riley let the words settle. You think they will let all of this stand, she asked. Your superiors, the people who sign those checks. They do not have many clean ways to avoid it, Hale said. You saved a very visible admiral in a very traceable way. Twice. The media already knows he is here. If he walks out of this building and says your name into a camera, they will listen. She thought of Mercer's eyes when he had looked at her. There had been no doubt there, no question about what side she stood on. Hale pushed the envelope toward her. No one is forcing you to sign anything tonight, he said. You can think, sleep, eat something that is not out of a vending machine. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. But whatever you decide, he added, you are not invisible anymore. Riley stared at the envelope for a long moment. Her hands rested on the table, palms flat. The scars on her forearms caught the light. For years, those marks had felt like evidence of a story no one knew. Proof of something that had happened in a place people preferred to forget. Now they looked less like secrets and more like pages from a file that was finally being opened. She reached forward and pulled the envelope to her side of the table. I will give you your statement, she said. You will get every detail I have. Hale nodded. In return, she added, you do not let them file this under unfortunate incidents and move on. His gaze did not waver. I cannot promise you how every person above my pay grade will behave, he said. But I can promise you I will not stop pushing it. That would have to be enough. A soft knock sounded at the door. The senior nurse from the ER, the one who had dragged Riley out of the trauma bay earlier, stepped in. She hesitated when she saw Hale, then focused on Riley. I heard you were up here, she said. Director Park wants to see you on the administrative floor. Riley's shoulders tensed. She can wait, Hale said. The nurse shook her head. She is on her way down, she said. Saves you the elevator ride. A minute later, Park appeared in the doorway. Her hair was no longer perfect. A few strands had escaped the twist. A faint crease marked the space between her brows. She took in the room the envelope, the faint blood on the cuff of Riley's scrub pants. I just spoke with Federal Liaison, she said. And with the chair of the board. Riley stood. If you are here to fire me again, she said, you are late. Park exhaled. I am here to apologize, she said instead. The word sat awkwardly in the air as if it were not used to leaving her mouth. I made decisions tonight based on contracts, and fear, Park went on. You made them based on the patient on the table. He is alive because of that. Whether I like the optics or not does not change the fact. She glanced at Hale. We will classify your previous termination as an administrative misstep, she said. Your record with St. Augustine will reflect a leave of absence pending review. If you choose to return, your position is waiting. Riley studied her face. You are not worried about liability anymore, she asked. I am terrified of liability, Park said. But I am more worried about what it would look like if this hospital pushed out the person who kept Mercer breathing. There are cameras in the parking lot now, Ms. Ward, and reporters trying to get past security. She almost smiled, tired and thin. Sometimes doing the right thing and covering yourself intersects, she said. I am not going to pretend this is pure altruism. You deserve to know that. It was the closest thing to honesty Riley had heard from her. Riley nodded slowly. I have not decided what I am doing yet, she said. But I will let you know. Park inclined her head. Take your time, she said. For what it is worth, I would be glad to have you back on nights. She left as quickly as she had come. The room felt a little different after she was gone, like someone had opened a window a crack. Later, the sky above San Diego lightened from black to deep blue. The city outside the hospital shifted into the hour where night staff and early risers shared the streets for a brief overlap. Riley found herself back on the main floor, standing near the same bank of elevators where her night had tilted sideways. A young man sat in a chair outside one of the rooms, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. His hair was cut close to his scalp. A hospital bracelet circled his wrist. His duffel bag rested at his feet, dusty and patched. His leg bounced with nervous energy. He looked up when he heard her footsteps. Ma'am, he said, half rising as if expecting to be told to move. At ease, she said automatically, then corrected herself. You do not have to stand, this is your chair. He sank back down, faintly startled by the phrase she had chosen. First time in a place like this, she asked, nodding toward the cluster of rooms. He shrugged one shoulder. First time back stateside in a while, he said. They said I should get checked out, make sure my head is screwed on right. He said it like a joke, but his fingers tightened together. Riley pulled a spare chair closer and sat beside him. What is your name? She asked. Tyler, he said. Sergeant Tyler Brooks. Riley, she said, I am just Riley tonight. He glanced at her scrub top at the faint stains that had not fully washed out. You work here? He asked. I do, she said, most nights. He nodded slowly. Feels weird, he said. One day you are over there. Next day you are in a lobby with bad art and worse coffee. People talk about traffic and grocery lists, and you still hear rotors every time the doors open. His voice trailed off. He looked down at his hands. Riley watched his fingers, the way they gripped and released, the tiny tremor in his thumb. She understood all of it. Thing about hospitals, she said, is they are full of people who are halfway between places. You are not the only one who feels like they are standing in two countries at once. He let out a breath that might have been a laugh. Do you ever get used to it? He asked. She considered her answer. You get better at walking, she said. That is a start. She extended her hand. If you want someone to loop you in on the map of this place, she said, I will be around. He hesitated for half a second, then took her hand. His grip was firm, warm, human. From somewhere down the hall, faint but audible, a heart monitor beeped in a steady, reassuring rhythm. Riley listened to it for a moment, then let go of Tyler's hand. She stood adjusting the badge that Park had reactivated and sent back down with an embarrassed smile. Welcome home, Sergeant, she said. Then she turned toward the hallway where a dozen small crises waited in rooms lined with glass and walked into the light. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.